I am 32, have a brother M 30, Kevin, who is a single dad to a 3-0. Kevin lives in the same city as me. We don't have any family of relatives here, just a few friends. Kevin has a habit of dumping his kid on me at random times to watch while he goes out on dates with women. So far he's gone out for 4 dates while expecting me to watch my nephew. It bothered me because I have work commitments, I'm a nurse, and my schedule can unpredictable, and so he caused me issues at work for dropping his kid off at my house without telling me first. Last week he did it again. He came over at 6 p.m. and entered my house with my nephew. He had a spare key, while I was showering, and left the house immediately. I got out of the shower and was shocked to see my nephew standing there alone. I asked where his dad was and he said he just left. I knew he wanted me to watch my nephew. I called him several times on the phone and he did not pick up. I was so mad and almost freaking out because I was getting late for my shift. I sent him a text telling him to come pick his son up right now or I'd call cops on him for child abandonment. He texted back begging that I suck it up just this time because he had an important date and he couldn't leave in the middle of it. I told him that I was serious and I'd do it and gave him 10 minutes to get home. He got home looking pissed and started yelling at me for ruining his date and making him leave in the middle of it, just because I couldn't bother skip one damn shift to watch my nephew. I told him I never agreed to watch his son and he made me do it. He said that it was an emergency, which made me laugh because calling a day-night emergency is just absurd. Long story short, he left with my nephew but hasn't stopped blaming me for spoiling his date and probably causing damage to the relationship between him and his potential girlfriend. It's been a week and he's still salty about it, demanding I make it to him and call his date and lie to her and tell her some sob story about why he had to leave like that, but I said I won't do that. Ada? I, 14M, recently took my sister, 4F, to a park close to my house. She was pretty excited to go because her dad bought her a bicycle and she wanted to try it out. When we arrived there was a lady with her 2 sons and a daughter. I made eye contact with the lady and just smiled and waved at her to be nice. After 15 minutes or so my sister was playing on the swings because she got scared and didn't want to ride a bicycle anymore. I looked away for a second to say hello to my uncle since he lives close to us and he was passing by, and when I turned my head around to check on my sister I saw she was crying and the lady's sons were using my sister's bike. I approached the kids and politely asked them to please leave the bike alone and use theirs. The 3 kids had brought their own bikes. They ignored me and continued to play with the bike. I decided to go up to the lady and ask her if she could talk to her sons. She responded with, "My kids are having fun and yours isn't using the bike, so I don't see a problem." I then responded with, "I'm aware that she isn't using it, but it's her bike and your kids have their bikes, so I don't see a reason for them to use her." She then started going on about how I have no reason to talk to her like that if I was going around getting girls pregnant, insinuating that my sister was my daughter. At this point I was pissed and didn't want to deal with this lady, so I angrily said, "Lady, she's my sister, and I believe I have the right to talk considering I'm not being a little bitch, so I'm going to ask again, are you going to tell your little rats to get off my sister's bike or not?" She then got up and told her kids to get in the car. Later when I got home I told my mom about it thinking she would see it as a funny story. Boy was I wrong. She started going on about how I was so rude to that lady and that I need to learn to respect my elders. Am I the asshole? My F/21 sister Jess, F/30, is married and has a 5-year stepson. Her husband works full-time and she is a Sam. Every Monday, she'd call my mom at 9 a.m. to get her to go over to her house and watch her stepkid for a few hours. I live at home with my parents and so I've noticed this routine for weeks now. Last week mom went out of town to visit some relatives, and yesterday, Monday, at 9 a.m. my sister called asking me to come watch her stepkid for a few hours because she had an important thing to do. I said no because I had to go study, and also she does this every Monday, so clearly it wasn't important or urgent, but she insisted it was. I told her sorry but no. She ended the call. Then I went to the university. Hours later, I got a call from my brother-in-law asking where my sister was. I said I had no idea. He proceeded to tell me he just came home at 1 p.m. and found his son by himself at the house. I was in shock that my sister left her stepkid by himself so she could go God knows where. I told him about the conversation I had with her and he got angry. In the evening my sister came over and started making a scene by yelling at me for bailing on her after she sent me a text message telling me she was already out the house to force me to come watch her stepson. I didn't see the FB message till she told me, but she said I did this deliberately and also exposed her to her husband because she told him she'd be at home with the kid. Not just that, but I also told her husband that mom comes over every Monday morning to watch the kid for a few hours, which caused a huge fight between him and my sister. She yelled that I was petty and selfish and just stirred shit and caused issues in her marriage by tattling to her husband. I couldn't keep arguing. I went into my room and started playing music. My dad and the others said I was to blame for not helping my sister and now being the reason she and her husband are in conflict. Ada? Okay guys, so I saw a few questions asked multiple times, so I'll just put the answers out here for all to see. 1. My brother-in-law's wife is deceased. 2. Brother-in-law is always at work when my sister calls my mom to get her to come over and watch her stepson. 3. Most of you guys are asking where my sister goes every Monday, and I even saw someone mention that I was daft for not finding out, but I don't know anything. I have no idea what's going with my sister and I thought it was none of my business. Update, guys. I've decided to try and find out what is really going with Jess. I'm not the type to snoop and it's not my business, but she already made it my business by turning the family against me because of something she did. NGL, I came here thinking I was going to get toast, but I wrong. Thank goodness for that. I'll update as soon as possible. Thanks, smile. 16 years ago my son Matthew had a daughter with his now ex-wife Josie. I have always thought of Josie as my own daughter, so when they divorced 7 years ago due to my son cheating, I was conflicted and disappointed. Josie wasn't particularly close with any of her family, so my husband and I naturally took them in. Josie was an angel. She had insisted that we didn't have to lift a finger more than before we had taken them in, and though she was hurt, she kept civil around Matthew. My husband and I held a huge hand in raising their daughter Ruth, because Matthew remarried less than a year later and now has a 4-year-old son after disowning Ruth. 2 years ago my husband was diagnosed with lung cancer. It was hard on everyone, especially Ruth. They were extremely close. She told him about her girlfriends and boyfriends before anyone else and has always wanted him to be the one to walk her down the aisle at her wedding. Matt rarely ever visited and didn't answer our calls, often saying that we had other kids, so it wasn't like my husband was dying lonely. Last night Matt stopped by to talk about inheritance. He never mentioned Josie nor Ruth and hinted that he thought he should get more inheritance than his siblings the entire time. My husband and I shared awkward looks until he decided to cut in. He explained that everyone would get a piece, but he'd focus more on Ruth and Bonnie, one of our other grandkids. Matt got angry and said that Ruth was just a bastard and that his son deserved more than her. My husband got furious after that and left the room saying that he wouldn't include Matthew at all. Matt yelled back and turned to me saying that Ruth wasn't worth it because she'd just grow up to be a whore like her mother. I told him that I'd rather have her mother as my daughter than him as my son and insisted that he leave. I'm getting phone calls from Matt's wife and family friends saying that my husband and I overreacted and he was just angry that we were playing favorites. Ada? Edit. To clear some things up, Josie did not cheat on Matthew. Josie and Matthew met later in college and Josie was known as a party girl before that. Ruth isn't the product of an affair, but we are planning on getting a DNA test because what Matthew said has gotten under Ruth's skin. She was at the house when this occurred and overheard it. When it came to taking in Josie and Ruth, we didn't hesitate because Josie is not from here. She and Matt lived in another country until he moved them here a few months before he got caught cheating, and they had nowhere else to go as Josie was a stay-at-home mom. I had no intentions of choosing Josie over Matt, then and now, and I never discouraged Matt from visiting. I tried to make it very clear that we weren't picking and choosing when we took Josie in. We just wanted her and our granddaughter to be safe and have a good home. My daughter Avery, 24, and her husband Tom, 29, are expecting their first baby together. They're both very excited and been getting so many things done in a short time. Because they've been busy lately, we haven't seen them in 2 months. Yesterday they visited me at the house to talk about the baby mostly. Tom asked me if I had emptied one of the rooms so I could turn it into a nursery yet. I was confused by his question and asked him why. He said that he expected me to. I asked why again, He looked at me and said that every decent grandmother prepares a nursery at her home specifically to welcome her grandson as a new member of the extended family. Then went on to give examples of how common this tradition is. I don't know why, but his words irked me. I asked why can't his mom prepare one for her grandson since this is her grandson too. He laughed and said that his mom already has one prepared that she paid for herself. I have to mention Tom's family is well off. Unlike us, we don't have an available room or money to afford a whole nursery, yet Tom insisted it's necessary and that I make efforts to make sure my grandson gets everything he needs whenever they visit. I looked at my daughter wondering if she agreed with this, and by the looks of it, she did. I told Tom that I don't have the space or money to make this happen, but he argued that not making this happen will affect how many visits I get compared to his mom, who's fully prepared and considerate of her grandbaby's needs. Avery finally spoke up but told me to please try to move my 16-year-old son to stay with his 14-year-old brother. I said no, the boys are old enough to get their own room, but Tom pitched in saying boys can share a room since they're boys, but I wasn't convinced. In fact, I was upset they came up with this suggestion. Avery didn't like that and took it as an I don't care about her baby and don't want to do anything for him, but that is just not true. The conversation turned into an argument and they left minutes later. Avery must have called my husband because he yelled at me when he came home saying this was no way to treat my daughter and our grandchild. I told him the story and he accused me of favoring the boys over Avery like I always do, but this time I just don't think her request is in any way reasonable. Edit. One thing to clarify, and that is I never said this was common. It is not unless you have a well-off family. That is why I think Tom said his family consider this normal. Tom offered to pay for everything and all I have to do is empty my son's room. I said no and the argument started again with Tom saying I'm refusing to work with them on a compromise, but this is not a compromise to me. Throw away. There was this guy 22M who I 20F have gone on a few dates with in the past couple of months. He's nice and so far we've only progressed to going on public dates, but about a week ago he finally decided to have a nice date at my place. Since it was going to be at my place, I let him know before that I was on my period because I wasn't sure what expectations he had or where his boundaries were yet, and we agreed to just have a nice takeout dinner and watch a movie. He comes over and we eat, then sit down on the couch to pick a movie. When he says that it sucked that I was on my period, then he said how he thought it was so strange that women give birth through the vagina but have periods from their butts. This was a completely unpromoted statement from him and I'm still not sure how we got on the topic. TBH, I asked him what he meant by that and he said again exactly what he had said before. I kind of smiled, assuming he was very much just joking, and said oh yeah. So weird, thinking that he was going to start laughing soon to end the joke. He didn't, and instead started to talk about his first and only girlfriend he'd had in high school and how she used to complain about bad period poops all the time. At this point I ask him if he is being serious and he looks a little confused and says he is. I asked him to explain how he came to that conclusion and he explained that his first experience being around periods was the HSGF and before then he had never received or seen much information. He understood it was something that happened inside the body and that blood came out somewhere, but assumed it came out of the vagina until he heard her complaining and realized it actually came out of the butt. It was very unexpected coming from a 22-year-old man. I somehow managed to keep my composure when I told him that periods do in fact come out of the vagina and not butts. He looked confused and then a little frustrated and started insisting to me that was wrong and then kept saying "Are you sure?" As if I was confused about where it came out of my own body. I explained to him the anatomy a bit and how it worked, but he was very adamant. Eventually he conceded that most women must have periods like that, but some, hence his XGF, have their periods form their butts. He just could not understand, no matter how many times I tried to explain it to him, that he had just simply come to the wrong conclusion and misinterpreted his GF's words. The whole situation became so much that I started to laugh. I was doubled over, clutching my stomach, crying laughing over this whole debacle, and he sat there red-faced, continuing to try and argue with me. Eventually he said he was ready to leave and did before we could watch a movie. I felt bad for laughing after he left because I could tell that had been when he decided to leave, and he also texted me later that night to say he had done a little bit of research on his own and that he was no longer interested in pursuing any sort of relationship because he couldn't stand to be with someone who laughed at someone for not understanding. Ada?